Welcome to the Best Kind Design podcast, where we believe that the best kind of spaces support your emotional, mental, physical, and spiritual well being. Here we explore how the spaces we dwell make us well and unwell. Consulting accomplished experts that are doing fascinating work on the cutting edge of science and senses, I am your host, Sonia Randall, interior architect and owner of Best Kind. Thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Hi, everyone. I'm super excited about today's episode. We're going to be exploring our sense of smell and basically how we can utilize scent in spaces to help facilitate and enhance our overall health and well-being. Our guest speaker today is Yasmine ElGhamrawy. She is an aromatherapist based out of London, UK, and her company is Yatlina. Thank you for taking time with me today. I am excited to talk to you about all things aromatherapy. I think, what would be great would be to have you first kind of define what aromatherapy is. People seem to define it in a lot of different ways. There's misconceptions around it. How would you define aromatherapy?
That's a very good question because there are several definitions of aromatherapy. I would personally define it as any extract that you get out of a plant that you use for therapeutic benefits that are good for you emotionally and physically. So it kind of encompasses quite a few things, and it also takes away from a lot of other things that would be just a scented product that's not necessarily an aromatherapy product. Because you see that quite a lot these days where you get like detergents or something like this, and they'll call it an aromatherapy detergent. It's not really aromatherapy. It's just a scented product. It's not necessarily an aromatherapy product. It's not what would be defined properly as an aromatherapy product. So to me, it has to be something that is particularly for a therapeutic benefit. So it has to be something that when you use it, it benefits you emotionally. And that could be either anything just making you feel better, making you feel more alert, the complete opposite, making you feel very relaxed, very sleepy, like whatever it is that it makes an effect on you physically. That is something that is, I would say, is an aromatherapy product. Whereas if it's something that just smells good, that could really kind of encompass quite a few other things. So it could be something like a perfume can smell good, but you wouldn't necessarily say a perfume is an aromatherapy product. So that's the same way I wouldn't say I've even seen socks being marketed as aromatherapy. So I'm not even quite sure how that works, but
yeah. So when you were saying that, I was just thinking of like things that are marketed as natural
yeah,
or, organic. You don't know exactly what's going on there. People use terms to describe things
exactly.
that
I think it muddles it up a little bit. I think it can also be quite confusing. Like just because something is natural doesn't necessarily, natural can actually have quite a few different definitions. You can have something that's called natural identical or natural isolates or a natural thing that comes directly from the plant. So natural can be quite a tricky term to say. It's the same thing as when people say something is clean. Clean is a very misleading word. You don't really know what that means, what the definition of that is. So I always would rather just say what's in a product. And then you decide whether that's something that's suitable for what you want or not. Because sometimes the synthetic alternative could be what you want. It could be something that's more a standard, product. It could be something that you've got certain allergies to, so you need to know exactly what's in something. So those definitions can sometimes be a little bit more of a marketing gimmick, more of kind of jumping on a bandwagon of, big words and buzzwords that people are using these days. And if you don't know exactly what's in something, you would naturally go to something that says that it's clean, it's natural, because you would assume it's better, but that's not always the case. So, yeah. So I think being very clear about what's in a product, what it does for you, is what's important. And then you decide if that's what you want or not.
Right. No, that makes complete sense. Basically, it's just being an informed consumer. It's basically making sure that what you're purchasing is what you're actually wanting to purchase.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of aromatherapy, so what I'm hearing is that you define it as it having basically beneficial properties for your physical, mental, emotional, like well-being, for your
Hmm.
health. So it has to have a healing or beneficial property for your body.
Yes, because I think if you understand how you smell something, like what's the process of smelling something, then you can kind of also understand where I'm coming from. So when you
Mhm.
smell anything, regardless of whether it's natural or not, you're actually smelling the small volatile components that kind of goes up into the air, it goes into your nose, and then it's actually your brain that interprets what it is that you're smelling. Like everything else is just like a tool that brings it up to the brain. And then the brain is the one that processes what it is that you're smelling. And it's a very sophisticated kind of mechanism that happens in the body. And really, what it's there for originally is for safety. Smell is there for safety. It's a very ancient kind of sense that you've got. And all it's doing is saying, okay, this is good for you, go towards it. This is bad for you, go away from it. It's a very simple kind of almost binary way of doing things in your environment to help make you survive and to thrive better. So if you understand that this is the original reason why you smell something, then you understand why certain natural components can work and affect you in a certain way. Because one of the things with aromatherapy components is that it is so tiny and so fine that it's one of the very few things in your environment that can cross the blood brain barrier, and that has a direct effect on how your brain interprets things. So that happens with any scented product, whether it's natural or not. Your brain does not really distinguish whether something is natural or not. It's your body that will have the reaction to it. So you can smell something like, like if you smell a perfume that you've got your mom used to wear or something like that, and you've got these really good memories with it, nothing natural about that, but you still get that happy feeling when you smell it, right? That's a really nice reaction to have. But you wouldn't necessarily get, say, like your brain will get sharper when you're doing some work or something like this. This wouldn't happen from a synthetic product, but you will get that side of the emotional kind of reaction to something, saying, oh, this makes me feel happy, which in a way is also a good reaction to have. But then if you use a natural product, the extra benefit you will get out of that is that it would affect you, like there will be certain physical effects that happen in your body because it reacts with certain receptors, it reacts with certain nervous system kind of circuits and things like that. You will get a very different reaction to it. That is also something you will get even if you're anosmic, even if you've lost the sense of smell, whether that's like a temporary thing or not. There's been certain studies, and this is like very popular these days because of COVID and how many people have lost their sense of smell, is that you will still get certain effects from natural products, even if you can't smell them. So that's a really
Right.
interesting thing. That shows you that there is a physical connection to what you're smelling that is not really there with any other sense. Any other thing you have to like touch something to be able to feel it. But with a sense of smell, you can smell something, not register it, but your body still reacts to it. So that's why the
Mhm.
sense of smell is very, very strong. It's very important.
Yes. I mean, when you were saying that about safety, and your smell system, your olfactory system, what I immediately remember, which most people have a story about this where they had food poisoning.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh yeah.
and they cannot smell that food anymore
Yeah.
without a physical
Yeah.
emotional response.
Yeah.
And that is purely through scent of,
Mm-hmm.
keep you safe. So obviously it would have, it makes sense that it would have an opposite effect of
Yeah.
things that make you feel good that you would associate with scent and memory,
Yeah.
because that's kind of, part of it with the food poisoning is part of memory. It's an
Yeah.
experience
Mm.
that has made you feel that way. And obviously your body had, a reaction. but,
Yeah. And you
but
also
I,
probably know that if you smell that thing, you will immediately get that memory of just being repulsed by it without
oh yeah.
even without even processing why. It will kick in why afterwards, but it's just a
Mhm.
visceral, quick reaction. It's like get away
Mhm.
from that smell straight away.
Exactly. I'm glad that we're talking about all this. I do want to peel it back a little bit because I want to know. I know that you have a very, interesting story. And I'd like to hear what drew you to aromatherapy and, what kind of got you into the field, what interested you about it initially.
I initially really liked anything that smells good. I did not have the terminology to call it aromatherapy. I grew up, my parents are Egyptian, so I grew up, my childhood was spent in Egypt, even though I was born in London and I live in London now. My first 18 years of my life were spent in Egypt. So in Egypt, it's quite an overwhelming place, you know. It's noise, it's sunshine, it's different smells everywhere. It's like you can identify different areas that you're in around the city by the smells, like the old spice areas, you know, the desert has a different smell, all these different things. So in a way, I was absorbing all of that without really realizing I was. It was just something that was, I just grew up with. It was natural for me to reach out for certain like spices that I would smell in different food, different oils. I really liked scented oils and perfumes and things like that. And then when I left Egypt to start work, and I did like a master's degree in visual effects and animation, and I worked in visual effects for films for 20 years. Nothing to do with aromatherapy at all. But throughout those 20 years of being very, very long hours, very, intense projects that you'd work on, um, because I was doing a lot of computer work and a lot of like grading of images and things like that. So I would be in a dark room for hours on end every day for weeks, just working on a project. So all these things kind of took a toll. And throughout those years, I would always reach out to scented products. I always like natural stuff just because, I don't know whether it was because I grew up with it or naturally I would just gravitate towards it. So I would go for like different oils, different, scented oils and things like this, but not really using the term aromatherapy. I just didn't have the language for that. I just knew that it worked. I knew it always made me feel better. It always, I was, I was always famous in whatever office I was in, to always having something scented on my desk, all that kind of stuff, always. And then when I finished, I had a break after 20 years, and it was that decision of whether to go back to visual effects again or just do something completely different. And during that time, I just decided, that's it, I'm done with being in front of a computer for 20 hours a day. I just want to do something different. And I kept on looking back at everything that I would do throughout the years and what was really something I was passionate about. And anything scented was the one that I would go back to all the time. So I decided I'm going to learn how to do, I would learn why aromatherapy worked. That was the reason why I started. It was the why. Like I wanted to know why when I used lavender, it was very relaxing, which is one of the things everybody tells you. Oh, lavender is very relaxing. If you want to sleep, use lavender. But nobody ever, or I never knew why it was like, what does it do exactly that makes it relaxing to you? And why is it that some people can't stand the smell of like my mom doesn't like lavender, so you have to use something else with my mom when I'm blending things for her. I used to use something else because she really does not like the smell of lavender at all. So no matter what I tell her about how relaxing it is, she will not relax if she smells lavender. So I was just
Right.
really fascinated by that, like why smells work, why they don't work, how they work, all of that. So yeah, so I basically started, I got my certification, for which took me about a year to do. And then after that first initial year, I found out that the more you know, the more you don't know. So I need to learn more and more and more. So it took me another 2 years on top of that of additional kind of education from different master classes, conferences, any education thing that was going, I was going for that one. And it happened to coincide with COVID at the time. So everything went online. So in a way, I was lucky because I didn't have to go anywhere. Everything came to me. So I spent 2 years basically just absorbing so much information from everyone because I thought if I'm going to do this and I'm going to be the one advising someone else to do it, I need to know everything about it so that I can be able to pick and choose the things that I think matches the person in front of me and matches what it is that they need. Some people need things that are very, very therapeutic. They need it for a very specific reason. They've got a cough, they've got a cold, they've got a pain that's been going on for ages. That's very specific what they want. Other people want things that, I just want my place to smell nice. I've got kids and they've always got, sniffles. I want something that I can put in the air that will make them feel better. Like it's different aspects of using the same plants and I need to be the one to choose what it is that's it's useful for. So yeah, so that's what I've been doing. I kind of started out by wanting to explain it to myself, to learn for myself how it worked. And the more I learned, the more I was really fascinated by it. And I found out all these different ways that scent can be used, not just aromatherapy, but just scent in like as a starting point is a really important thing. And that can then be utilized in so many different ways. And now that I know the chemistry behind each oil that I'm using, that makes a very big difference. So if someone like say like my mom doesn't like lavender, I know what works in lavender that makes it relaxing, but I also know that other oils that don't smell anything like lavender can also be very relaxing, and maybe that would be an alternative that I can use with someone like that, or maybe blending it with something else that kind of takes away that very floral lavendery kind of smell to it can actually work also in a different way. So it then becomes like a really almost experimental way of playing with different scents and different things, and knowing also the sources of everything. So there's also the sustainability side of things. There are certain oils that are really good, but you really try to avoid using them as much as possible because of sustainability issues. They are not there forever. If we keep using them the same way, they will just disappear, and that would be a shame. So you only really use certain things in very specific ways. Other things, go for it. They're everywhere. Go use as much as you want out of that one, take the benefit out of it. So yeah, that's really my kind of way of getting into aromatherapy. And that's also my approach to how I practice it with other people. I like using scent and using aromatherapy in different ways just to enhance daily life. It doesn't have to be something that's special or only therapeutic or only medicinal or only clinical. You can use it and incorporate it into your life in different ways that can really make a difference in your well-being. And it's also quite like you accumulate. The more you use it, the better it is for you. And the more you'll become more sensitive to synthetic stuff and chemical stuff. So you'll find yourself naturally using less and less of the things that maybe are not as good for you. I'm not saying cut out everything. I mean, it's not really realistic to say that, is it? It's not realistic to say live in a bubble of only natural stuff. It's just not going to happen. But what you can do is maybe take the load off a little bit of what you're doing, and incorporating something that's natural is a really simple way of doing it. It's pleasurable, it smells good, it makes you feel good, and it takes away a lot of that load that your body has to kind of process to detox a lot of the chemicals that are in there. So yeah, so that's how I got into aromatherapy and how I practice it these days.
What I'm hearing is that your approach is, well, one, that you kind of personalize it. So, like, based on people and their preferences in
Mm,
terms of scent. So, that's important. Also, sustainability is important to how you approach aromatherapy, as well as the science behind
mm-hmm.
aromatherapy. How would you kind of, simplify that for people just in terms of them as they navigate, like if they're interested in aromatherapy and they want to figure out the different approaches and what they're looking for, how would you define yours?
Mine is based on three very simple things. I always go for the chemistry first because you need to understand what each oil does. You need to know what it's good for, what it's not good for, when to use it, when not to use it. And again, alternatives for it if for whatever reason you cannot use that specific oil, whether it's preference or sustainability or whatever reason. So the chemistry to me is very important. And that's the thing that differentiates someone who's home blending, something which is what I started out with. You just blend things that smell nice, not really
Mm-hmm.
knowing what it is that you're doing. It just smells nice at the end of the day from a professional who's spent time learning these things and experimenting and finding out why certain things work and things like that. So the chemistry and the science and the research, which I have to say over the last few, even like within the few years that I've been doing this, the research aspect of things has gone up quite a lot. There's been a lot more interest in how things work. There's always difficulty in doing research with aromatherapy because you very difficult to do like a double blind, all these kind of things because something either smells or it doesn't smell. So it's kind of that you can't really be blind to a smell. Like it doesn't work that way. So that's why sometimes research can be quite difficult in it. But there's still a lot of research out there that you can take conclusions from, you can take ideas from, and you can take kind of starting points from. So this is something that's very important to me. That's I think also the geeky side of me, the nerdy side that's always worked with computers. I like that research side of things. And then the other side is the traditions and things that have been going on for thousands of years. Scent is not a new thing. Using scented products and plant extracts and things like this goes back thousands of years. No matter what culture you look at, there's always been an element of scented products in there. Of course, I know the Egyptian history more than any other history, but with Egypt, it was the scented products was almost like taken to a level that's almost holy. It was like temple priests would be in charge of what scents were used with what gods and what ceremonies and things like that. So it was never just something that was taken for granted. It was very highly evolved. And I think an element of that has always been present in any indigenous culture, in any historical kind of references. There's always something to do with scent in there, which to me, if something has lasted for thousands of years, there is a reason why it's lasted for thousands of years. So I always personally look at traditions. Like if I'm using, like say frankincense, for example, because it's a good example for that, I will always look to see how has it been used all over the world for different ceremonies, for different reasons. Terminology might change, because you always use the terminology for your time or through the lens of how you understand something. So you might kind of call it warding off the evil eye, whereas a science paper can call it, antiviral and antibacterial. But really, like the results of what they're talking about will be very similar. It's just terminology can be kind of a bit very flowery on one end, which can be dismissed quite easily. But really, when you look at it, it's not. There is something to it. So that side of things is something that I really kind of like, finding the links between things, because I think it also helps you with your approach to how you blend something towards someone. Some people are very dry. They're very scientific. They want you to tell them why something works, how it works in the body, if it will interact with any medication they take. So they're very kind of like, I need the facts and I'll make up my mind. Other people don't want to hear anything about the chemistry. And what they really want is like, how will it make me feel? Will I feel better when I'm using something? And if I know both sides and I know the common elements between the two, and I'm really talking about the same thing, I'm just using maybe slightly different language to cater to that person in front of me, that makes a difference. That makes a difference in also how they will use something and if they will stick to using something. Like compliance to sticking to something is very important, because there's no point in me spending days making the perfect blend and balancing it out, and then I give it to you and you hate the smell of it. It doesn't matter what I tell you that blend is good for. It has to be something that resonates with you. There has to be an element of it that's you in that blend. And I think that's very important. The scent is very important. That's kind of the third element, is that you cannot make something that is just functional without it being beautiful at the same time. There are certain oils that are quite difficult to work with because they are quite pungent, but they're really good. So, okay, how do I balance this out? That's the side of things that I look at as being a little bit more artistic. It's almost like being, that therapeutic perfumer kind of thing. You look at things and like, perfume making is an art form. So how do they do that? How do they use different elements, the different percentages? Maybe sometimes it's just one drop of one oil that just marries everything together and just kind of makes it really beautiful. Maybe all you need to do is leave a blend for a couple of weeks to just make everything kind of blend together really beautifully, and then use it, not use it straight away when things are a bit sharper and some oils are kind of a bit more prominent than others and all that. So it's that kind of element of knowing how to present something that makes a very big difference to me. So yeah, so it's basically the science of it, the traditions, and the scent. These are three things that I think if you use them properly and you know how to marry them together, makes a really nice product at the end that either is catered to a specific person or is more for an emotion that a lot of people can resonate with. Because, I do blends for consultations that are for one-on-one person. Sometimes it's not for that person. Sometimes it's for their space, their home, their work, something like this. But sometimes I will do products that are sold for specific things, like, a calming blend, a relaxing blend, an energizing blend. So you also have to kind of be a little bit like you guess a little bit how something would appeal to most people. So yeah, it's fun. I find it a lot of fun kind of playing with different
I love
scents.
that. Yeah, I love that. I'm thinking there's a few things I want to unpacked here. So first thing that really resonated when you said it was that marrying and of tradition, just from the
Mm-hmm.
sense, just from the sense of not disregarding thousands of years of history.
Mm-hmm.
There's just because science hasn't done a study around it yet doesn't necessarily mean there's no information or wisdom or knowledge to gain from that.
Definitely, yes.
So I think that's important for people to know, because I think, I think that's okay if you just want to wait till the studies are done. Don't get me wrong. Everybody's different. It's what works for you, and people have their own personal preferences, and they should do what works
Mm-hmm.
best for them. But sometimes people will disregard things thinking that, it doesn't have any validity because it's not in science yet. It could just mean that there's not as much money and resources done in
Mm-hmm.
the olfactory system yet, and they just
Yeah,
haven't been able to do all these studies. So,
yeah.
if you read something, I guess the point is to listeners, if you read something and it really resonates with you and it doesn't have a harmful impact on your health, then go for it.
Yeah.
There's no harm. Maybe it will enhance, just as tradition has said. So I love that you are questioning and kind of exploring all these different areas and taking bits from each. I think that is just amazing. The other part that you spoke to that really, makes sense to me as an interior designer is that function and beauty does matter. You do have to have both. Function is first.
Yeah.
Like you said, you need to understand the same as spaces. You have to understand how someone's going to use their space, what they physically need in
Mm-hmm.
that space to, reach a goal, if it's a workspace or, objective and all that stuff. But if it's at your home, like again, you need a fridge for your food. You need a bath for washing yourself. It's function first before beauty, but both are extremely important.
Yeah.
I'd love it if you could speak to some of your consultations, a client that you've worked with where they've designed their space and they've incorporated aromatherapy to enhance that space, the experience, to enhance, the overall. When I say experience, partly what I'm referring to is the health and well-being
Mm-hmm.
of the people in that space. And yeah, I think that would be great to hear.
Yeah, I've done a few projects like this, but one that comes to mind that was like one of my favorites to do was a lady that I've known for a while, and she was opening up a clinic on the grounds of an area called Fulham Palace here in London. Which actually had like a small palace in the middle of it where the bishops of the UK or London or something would live up until like the 1970s, so not that long ago. It's a beautiful, beautiful grounds. It's old, ancient buildings, really thick walls, stone inside, and then surrounded by all these gardens with beautiful flowers, and they kind of change seasonally and everything. So the setting on its own was just absolutely amazing. And she was renovating the whole place inside. So she started from scratch, very limited with what she can do because it's a listed building. I don't know if it's the same in America, but if it's a listed building, you're very limited to what changes you can do on it because it's a
Mhm.
historical kind of site. So she was very careful, but she really was very keen on incorporating as many natural elements in there as possible. The idea was to bring the outside in. So you're bringing this kind of the gardens outside with the trees and the flowers and everything, so that when you're inside the building, you still have that connection with outside. And then I was brought in to do a consultation for the scent because she wanted to have a signature scent for the whole clinic. She also wanted different rooms to have different scents, like the treatment rooms, and then her room to have a separate scent because that's her kind of her sanctuary in there. And she wanted that to have like a separate scent from everywhere else. So that was a really fun one because that combined so many things that I love, basically. One was one-on-one consultations where I get to learn about the person in front of me, learn about their preferences in scent, what it is that they like, what they don't. More importantly, what they don't like, because you don't want to be surrounded by something that smells good to everybody else, but you hate it. That's not going to that's never going to work. So it was very important for me to kind of go through everything. I do this during the consultations. I do these things where it's a blind aroma kit. So I give people scent strips that they smell without telling them anything about it. Do you like it or you don't like it? I don't tell them what it's called. I don't, so they don't have any preconceived idea of, oh yeah, I like lavender or I don't like lavender, all these kind of things. I just give them a scent strip and tell them, do you like this or not? Let's talk about it. We talk about it several times. We go back to it, back and forth until I kind of reach a conclusion whether they like it, they don't like it, or it's an in between kind of thing. And we go through different ones and then we go through them in blends because blends can also be very different than just a single oil. A lot of the times people are used to oils in synthetic forms. So they'll be used to, like, say, a rose scent, but they're used to smelling it in a perfume. They're used to smelling it in like hand creams and things like this. More than likely, that's a synthetic form of rose, not a natural rose. And sometimes when you smell the real thing, it's actually much stronger. It's really, really kind of prominent. So sometimes they're like, oh, I like rose. And then they smell rose and they're like, oh, I'm not sure about that one. So I'm always like, I never tell them what it is that they're smelling. I make them, make up your own mind. So we went through that process and we ended up doing 3 different scents with her room being completely different than the others. But that was a really interesting one because not only did we have to scent the place based on what she wanted, based on the outside and the elements that were in there to bring them in, but we also had to take into consideration the environment that it was going to be in, the room size, the room height. You don't want to, because part of that thing, this is what's called functional scenting. So you're scentscaping a place. So when you go into a place, people have done this for thousands. This is not, the term might be new to aromatherapy or, anywhere that you see it. But really the way that you've been doing it, this has been around for thousands of years. People have always like burned incense like for an entrance of something. They've, to cover up a smell in the kitchen, you'll put some like rosemary and lemon on a pot or so. This is scentscaping. That's a form of scentscaping that, people have been doing it everywhere. But this is more very intentional because I'm using very specific scents for a reason. So not only are they there to, say, help someone feel welcome and relaxed when they come into the place, it's something that makes them feel good as soon as they smell it. It's also there to maybe be a disinfectant in the air, be kind of a bit antimicrobial for airborne viruses. Because, being in London and it's always a bit damp and you come in, you go out, all that kind of stuff, people are always sniffling. So you also want it to have a certain function, but you don't want it to smell as if you're spraying like an antibacterial spray in their face as soon as they come in. It has to be something that's, it's kind of disguised under all these different elements that are in there. So that was also an element you have to take into consideration. That's the environment that it's in. I had to take into consideration whether anybody that is working there, more than people visiting, because that kind of come and go, but the people working there, is anybody allergic to anything? Is anybody like very adverse to any certain scents or anything like this? That's also something you have to take into consideration. In that particular scent, I didn't take into consideration pets or kids because that was not really, but in other projects, I had to take that into consideration, whether you have pets or not, especially cats. Sometimes you have to be very careful with them. Children, you have to be careful with certain oils with children, can be a bit too much for their lungs to process. Not so much in this project. The other thing was it was going to be 3 different scents, but they're inside the same environment. So you almost have to make sure that they layer together well. They don't clash with each other. So you end up going from one space to the other, and it's just a very relaxing, very calming atmosphere. It's not jarring. It's not like you smell one thing and suddenly you stop and smell something else, and it's kind of something is, not that it's wrong, but it's just jars you. So you have to layer things in a way that work well together. I also had to take into consideration the fact that she had a coffee machine in one area. So will that smell clash with the coffee if somebody's making a coffee there in the kitchen or something? So there's all these different considerations that were really fun to kind of play around with and fun to take into consideration when you're setting up a blend. And the end result was, the signature scent for the whole space, a scent for the treatment rooms, and a scent for her. And I've been getting feedback from her since then. So she's opened up, this was just recently in October or November last year. She's been open since then. And she was telling me that so many people have commented on how nice it smells as soon as they come in. Like that's one thing that was part of what they commented on. And then she said another thing is that she's noticed that people are a lot more relaxed in the environment that they're in. Because part of the treatments that she does is doing procedures that involve needles. And a lot of people are obviously very scared of needles. You tense up straight away as soon as you know a needle is coming towards your face. It's a natural reaction. I think you should. And she was saying she's noticed that a lot of people are a lot more relaxed when they do it and not necessarily commenting on the scent. They don't even notice it. It's just something they're taking in. It's affecting how they're reacting, and it's just making their experience a lot better. And that to me was beautiful to hear. It kind of hit all the marks that we wanted to do. It incorporated the natural elements that her interior designer incorporated into the design of the place. It's that kind of biophilic architecture, where you put kind of like a living wall in there, some plants, some natural material, cork, bamboo, all these things that you might not notice unless you're looking for them or you know what they are. But all these things play an element. All these things help you feel better, help your well being in different layers. So it might be you're sitting on something where the material is really nice and natural. You're looking at something that's a bit wood, it's got that nice kind of natural look to it. And then you're smelling something that is also all natural. So even though it's scenting a place and you could have easily lit a candle or sprayed something in the air, and that would have jarred you out of it. The fact that it's a natural scent on top of all these things is just an extra layer that helps your well being and helps you feel better. And that's one thing that I think is a really nice way of incorporating natural elements into your life. It doesn't have to be all in or all nothing. It can just be elements in there that really do make a difference once they add up. And I think eventually what will happen is that you will start feeling better. And if you're mindful of why you're feeling better, it will spill over into everything else in your life, because once you start feeling good about something, you want it to keep going on. You don't want to introduce something that breaks it. You kind of add to it. You want to, maybe you'll start, taking better walks outside because it's a natural thing. There's that element of being connected to nature that is really beneficial to you on a very visceral level, because we co-evolved with plants. So we have that connection. Humans have connections with plants that are evident in so many different things, not just scent, but you find yourself more attracted to natural material than you do to synthetic ones. Just naturally, this will be a reaction. And I think that reflects in a lot of different things. So elements at home, even like there's been research where just looking at a picture of nature helps make you feel better, helps lower your stress level. Just a picture of nature, let alone being outside in nature. There's been this really interesting research about how people recover faster and require less painkillers if they're recovering in a hospital ward that's got a window that overlooks a natural site. Like that's all it is. You don't even need to do anything else. Just put a picture of nature somewhere and that makes you feel better. It has a physical reaction in your body. So yes, I think little elements, little things that add up make a big difference at the end.
Yeah, I again have, you've said so many things that I think are really powerful. And I want to kind of touch on a couple of them so that, to just basically amplify the message, because I definitely want listeners to be able to really learn and gain information, like whatever resonates from this, to help enhance their health and well-being through spaces. And, so for example, the first thing that you said with this clinic, you said, they wanted to layer in scent into a space that people are going to for literally for health and well-being.
Yeah.
So what I heard when you said that, as an interior designer too, is, bringing nature in. As you said, there's
Mm.
literally studies done around how nature lowers your cortisol. And my first question that came up there, because I mean, I've known that study for a long time, that, anybody in any space, whether it's your home, workplace, whatever, you want to have plants or
Yeah.
nature. That's just one aspect of nature, but let's take plants. You want to have those in your space because they're literally, oxygen, and there's just so many benefits physiologically of nature. But on top of it, what I like to hear about this clinic and how I'd like to see, all spaces, honestly, be approached from a health and well-being standpoint is it's all senses.
Yeah.
All senses matter. It's a full experience. And we as humans take on an experience through all of our senses. And then,
Mm.
maybe our, sixth sense too, whatever resonates with you. But the point is that your olfactory system is very important.
Mm-hmm.
And, the question that came up to me that I hadn't thought of before, I was wondering, has there been any studies done on the smell of plants and if that actually has a physiological response in terms of calming, in addition to, I know, auditorially? Like,
Mm.
I actually interviewed a sound expert not that long ago, and, he mentioned to me how birds,
Mm.
literally the sounds of birds, will physiologically calm your body. And it has to do with our evolution in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that if birds were around, that meant you were safe. There's no
Yeah.
predators there. So you automatically start to feel safer, and you're not even you may not understand why, but there's
Yeah.
reasons behind it. So, that's kind of one thing that I love that, that they really layered in. I wanted to also bring attention to part of this layering is when I heard you describing this, I'm thinking, okay, they probably used a lot of neutral colors. There was, I'm thinking they were very intentional with the number of items in the space. It's clean. Obviously, you said functionally too, just even in terms of, from a clinical standpoint, clean. But I'm thinking when you're layering in senses, you also don't want to overpower
Mm.
all of your senses, because you don't want to walk into a space that's like full of stuff and then the scents are like your body is going to be overwhelmed, and that's
Yeah.
not the goal.
No,
The goal that
no,
you're
definitely
describing,
not.
yeah, so the goal is I want to feel calm. So,
Yeah.
like, I just want to highlight that to listeners, that when you do choose to think about more mindfully all of the senses, like we're talking about smell here, it impacts everything else. You have to look at it holistically as an entire space. But, the other thing that you mentioned, which I love, and I just want to reiterate too, is that when you go into a consultation, what I was hearing is like you have a similar approach to when a designer goes in, an interior designer goes into a space, and you have your consultation, you hear their wants and needs and their preferences, and then you take that, but then you also kind of fill in other things that you just know is good for health and
Mm.
well-being that they may not even be aware of, so like that's what I was hearing when you were saying, I give them sense. Like I took this analysis of them and what they need and want. And then I also was like, well, this is a clinic and they didn't say they specifically wanted this, but this will really help enhance the
Mm.
well-being. So I'm going to add a little bit of that and see
Yeah.
if they also like it. Is,
Yeah.
is that
That's
correct?
definitely part of it. I mean, that's the reason why you would go to have a bespoke consultation as opposed to just picking up a product off the shelf. Because there are
Right.
products off the shelf that are really good and they're made to be like calming or energizing or whatever. But if you do a bespoke service, that's very different because then it not only incorporates what you want, but you're getting the advantage of the experience of the person in front of you who will
Mhm.
advise you on what should work, what shouldn't work, uh, like one of the things I had to do in one of these consultations was actually pare down what the client wanted. Like for me, business wise, that was not good. She wanted like 10 different products. To me, that would have been very profitable. But I couldn't in all like kind of consciousness just say, yes, take the 10 products, because they would have been horrible. They would have been so overwhelming to anybody smelling them that it would have just been the complete opposite of what they wanted at the end of that consultation. So I had to say, no, actually, what you really need is just two. You don't need 10 products. 10 products is too much. And part of what you said is that subtlety of things. When you do a functional scent, you really want it to be very subtle. You want maybe to, I mean, the brain normally would always recognize something that's different first to kind of assess. It's always about safety, always. Is this safe or not? So the first thing you will do when you enter a new place and you smell something that is not recognizable, you will notice it. And that is to assess whether it's safe or not. When it's safe, your brain will no longer notice it. That's why when you say have something that's going throughout the whole day in a room like a diffuser or something, you'll notice it maybe the first like half an hour, and then that's it. You will not notice it. If you do keep noticing it, that is not a good thing. That is not a good thing to keep noticing something over and over and over again. That is almost like your brain telling you this is too much, this is too overwhelming. We are noticing this because we want to get rid of it. And if you keep like people keep spraying things over and over again, like you spray yourself with a perfume in the morning, you don't smell it an hour, it's still there. Other people can smell it. You just can't smell it anymore. You spray again and again, and then you then you can like be, like you enter with your smell first into a room. That's just way too much. I always tell people that if you're going to do a functional scent for a space, think of it as if you're going into a garden, like a rose garden or something like this. The first thing you will smell are the roses, because it's like all these smells, all these beautiful things going around. But then when you're walking around, you won't really smell it constantly. You'll maybe pick it up if like the wind picks up or something like it. It will just be a little kind of breeze that comes in. And that's how it should be. It shouldn't be something that is constantly there, kind of hammering into your senses. Because honestly, that's when people start getting headaches. That's when they start feeling a little bit nauseous or nauseated, whatever the proper adjective is. When you feel sick, basically. All these things
Right.
is your body just reacting to something that is just too much. And that is the opposite of what you want. Because that is also, if you think of it from like the aromatherapy point of view, when going back to my definition of it being good for you, this is when it will be too much. This is actually when you will start getting adverse reactions to something. The less it is, the better it is. Like less is more always with aromatherapy. Like if you can use one oil instead of five, use that one oil if that makes it reach the function that you want. So it's the same thing when you're doing a functional scent. Always think of safety, function, and subtlety at the end of the day. That's really what you want to do. And I think you also mentioned if there's been any studies that kind of try to connect nature with effects. There's actually been quite a few studies about that. And one of the famous ones is the forest walking one that how in Japan, and I can't remember the term of it now. It's a Japanese term, but basically it means forest bathing, which is if you go out in nature, you basically smell all these like it's specifically conifer trees are the ones that they always mention in all these things. And it's interesting because conifer trees were one of the first plants to evolve on Earth. And they are the reason why we've got oxygen, all that kind of stuff. So there is this very deep connection between humans and conifer trees and the conifer oils specifically. That's why they're always very good for anything to do with breathing and anything like this. There's this affinity for conifer trees that all humans have. And there has been studies made in Japan where people who walk in nature, and I think it was, if I remember correctly, it was as little as just half an hour. It wasn't even something that was like like you can walk even in a park or something. Like you don't have to be immersed in, if you're lucky enough to be near a forest, of course, but not everybody's that lucky. And that has been shown to lower the stress hormones in the body to the point where certain studies are showing that it can even affect cancer cells and recovery times and things like that. So there is a massive, massive connection between nature and how you react to it in different ways. And a lot of it has to do with your sense of smell, because all these conifer trees and trees in general and plants in general, they emit the volatile chemicals off of them. And this is really what you get in essential oils. They're just in the air. That's why when you walk around in somewhere that's open space, you feel better. You just feel like you're breathing deeper. That breathing deeper makes you feel, lower your stress. So it's just a cascade of events that happens that ends up making you feel better at the end of it. And I think that was really evident during COVID when everybody was basically forced to be indoors for quite a long time, disconnected from everything. And there was a huge surge of people buying indoor plants. There was this massive surge of people, and it was just instinct. People wanted to buy things or be closer to nature and to make them feel better. So that was a really interesting thing that happened without people being conscious of it. You found that you were very attracted to going to natural things and green things. And so I think even without, like you said, like even without science behind it, even without having all these charts and all these, empirical evidence of things, there are anecdotal evidence that have been around for thousands of years that we should really take into consideration. A lot to do with senses like smell, sound, like the bird sound. That's a really interesting one. Nature in general. There is definitely something to that we should not dismiss as just nonsense and superstition. There is definitely something to it, I think.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up around the subtlety, and that was, I think, a really good point. Because when I was thinking of, I've had times that when I've thought of scent, like when everyone has the experience when they get into a cab and it's like they have those artificial, I would get an instant headache and
Yeah,
would feel nauseated.
yeah.
And, so I'm glad that you brought that up, because that it's subtlety and there's an art to it, and there is a science to it, and the amount is very important
Hmm.
in terms of your system to not overtax it, to stimulate it just enough so that you get that right balance to be able to benefit from these scents. Bringing it back to spaces, because I want people to kind of be able to kind of hear this and have some information that they can kind of use at home too.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that obviously we talked about personalizing, so having kind of a bespoke consultation, the same as an interior designer. Like you can hire a designer, and there's benefits to that, as well as you can hire an aromatherapist. There's benefits to kind of have someone basically come in with a knowledge base that you're not going to absorb on YouTube in 3 hours because they have, decades of experience. It just comes with any field,
Yeah.
that's just logical. But if you're, treating it, like health, like you just want to add something to your home, like as an interior designer, I hear all the time, most of my clients say, I want a sanctuary. I
Mm-hmm.
want somewhere where I can go home and I can unwind. I can be myself. I can, feel at ease and comfortable and relaxed, and part of that I think is just, well, generally people like to feel that at home. But I also think that in today's day and age, there's a lot of stressors put on the body in a lot of different ways, in all forms. And so I think, that's also part of, a lot of people do carry an extra taxed system, extra
Mm-hmm.
stress and anxiety. It depends on, what load you have and what you're going through. But what would you recommend for someone like off the shelf? How would you recommend them approach to, say, bringing more calmness into their space through scent?
Mm-hmm. That's a really interesting one because it's a I think you can incorporate scent in different ways. You don't need to buy expensive stuff. You don't need to kind of go in and, blend really expensive things and all that kind of stuff. Think of what is simple and around you. Sometimes just certain herbs in your kitchen cupboard can be really nice. Like, why not put some of that in a way that you can smell them somewhere? Like you can smell, say, like cinnamon is a really nice one. It's quite strong. Most people really like that smell of it. It's always associated with like festive times, really kind of like happy times, things like that. If you're going to buy oils, I would probably think of maybe 4 or 5 oils that are a really good starter kit to have. Just make sure you buy them from somewhere that's reputable. Don't buy them from any kind of online platform that just sells things that look really cheap. They can be cheap, but not too cheap. Too cheap, be very suspicious of it. Because there is a certain price you have to pay for natural products, and anything that's a little bit too cheap, just kind of be a little bit wary of it. Just go to certain companies that are known to sell good stuff. I would always start with lavender is a really good one. It's not expensive. It can blend with so many different, even if you don't like lavender specifically on its own, it blends really well with other things. Rosemary is another one that's completely different from lavender. It's a really good one for if you want this like freshness, and really good for anything to do with like work, cognitive enhancing abilities. Like if you want to be memorizing something or working really hard on something, rosemary is a really nice, fresh kind of smell to it. Plus, it's also very good for other like therapeutic things like, skin and hair and things like that. But I'm talking more about scent in the air, that kind of one. Another one that's really good is orange. That's also one that's kind of universally liked. People really like kind of fresh, zesty, citrusy smells. It always makes you feel very happy. And the interesting thing about orange, even though it's a very kind of, people would think it's a very energizing, very active oil, it's actually very good for sleep also, which not a lot of people know. So if you combine orange with lavender, that's actually a really good, very simple blend to do. Diffuse it in the air, and that's a very relaxing, kind of calming scent, but not too flowery and lavendery. Also, it's kind of a nice blend between the two. The other one I would think of is peppermint. Again, very simple, easily available kind of oil. That's a very good oil that's very refreshing, very clarifying. If you've got any kind of airborne viruses or you want to clean surfaces, that's a very good oil for that. Tea tree is another one. I love tea tree. Some people find it a bit too medicinal, but I quite actually like that smell. And that one is like a good all rounder. Again, blends really well. If you blend it with peppermint and rosemary, it gives this really kind of almost very cleansing smell. So it's a really nice one if you just want to have like clean up the air, as if you open up the windows and let kind of fresh air come in. If you blend it with lavender, it then turns completely different, and it could be a really nice smell for just the living room kind of living area. So yeah, these kind of, there's lots of different oils that are not expensive to have. And then there's also the option of going back to that traditional way of using things. So there's ways of putting like a pot on the stove, putting like a sprig of rosemary in it, some lemon in there, and just let it kind of simmer slowly. That gives a really nice smell to the whole house if you have that. That's not expensive to do. Again, putting some of those drops of the oils maybe in some baking soda, putting it around the house with some Himalayan salt or something like this. Again, a really simple way of kind of just cleansing the air. Burning candles that are made from beeswax are really good, because beeswax actually it ionizes the air a little bit, so it actually cleanses the air around it, and it gives this like sweet honey kind of smell to it. So I'm trying to think of different resins are very good. Things like frankincense, myrrh, if you've got access to that, that's really nice. If you get good quality ones, you really do not need a lot of it. Actually, I've like set off fire alarms with it because I put too much in there. So you really just need a tiny, tiny bit of that. So you have to be careful now. But yeah, that's kind of the things that I'm thinking of that are really, they are not expensive. You can start off with that, see how you kind of live with it, how you kind of it enhances the area around you. And that could also be really useful if you do decide to go for a professional consultation, because then you can tell that person, I've used this and this, I really liked it. I use this and I really do not like that one. So let's try and avoid that one. All these things help, like these different combinations help. And if you get things that are good quality, you don't need a lot of it. You need like a drop or two, and that's it. Like, see how that works first before you kind of put in like half a bottle of something. That again is that overwhelming kind of side of things. So yeah, I'm trying to think of things that are really straightforward, easily accessible, not expensive to do. These are things I can think of that are like that, really.
That's great. I'm thinking, for a beginner person that's dabbling in, health
Yeah,
benefits from aromatherapy, would are there any safety or health like just basic things that you
always.
want that you kind of have your like go to tell people like, hey,
Yeah.
just go, like are there certain things that people should be mindful of as they're just starting to kind of incorporate this into their home environment?
Yes, definitely. So anybody that's got any kind of respiratory issue should be always very careful of things like that. Like one of the things people always say is like, oh, you can't breathe well, just go for peppermint, go for eucalyptus. These are very opening oils. And that works for most people. But sometimes actually what it does is it does the opposite for someone who say got asthma or got any kind of breathing issues. That can actually work the opposite because it works on the same receptors that are inflamed. So your body basically recognizes it as an attack. So you actually have even worse attacks of asthma from it. So you have to be very careful if you've got these kind of issues in the background. The other thing is oxidization. So certain oils, like from the ones I mentioned, like orange, any citrus oil, tea tree is another one also that can oxidize. And oxidization is basically when the components that are in that oil react with the oxygen in the air, and then it metabolizes to a point where it becomes an irritant. So if you're going to, and this is specifically if it's going to touch your skin in any way, that can be really problematic. If you're going to diffuse it in the air, it's not so much of an issue. Actually, a lot of aromatherapists, if they've kind of like forgot about a bottle of orange or something for a year and it's like, okay, can't use this on the skin anymore, they'll use it for like as a cleaning product because it smells good. So this is one thing you should definitely look for, like skin safety issues. So anytime any essential oil, regardless of what it is, no matter how safe it is, touches your skin directly, that is not a good thing. It will probably be okay, like maybe once or twice, accidentally, everybody when they touch bottles and stuff like that. But if it keeps happening, your skin will react to it. And if your body starts reacting to an essential oil, that can be problematic because a lot of the components in one oil are common with so many other things. So then you will start getting these reactions to lots of different things. And sometimes you won't relate it to an oil. You'll just think you're allergic to food, you're allergic to this. So it will just become this mess that you don't know where it's coming from. So always be very mindful when you're using essential oils, any skin contact, any kind of health issues you have in the background, to be very careful. Sometimes if you've got high blood pressure or you're on heart medication, also be very careful with certain. Just ask or go to reputable websites that will, if they're selling an oil, will always tell you, maybe have a look at this, send us a message, let us know what you're doing, something like that. Just be careful with it. Just because it's natural does not automatically mean that it's safe. If anything, sometimes the natural stuff, because they're not as regulated, they're not as standardized, you have to be more careful with them. Sometimes synthetic components, because they have to go through a lot of regulations, can actually be safer in some ways. They might not be as good for you, for therapeutic reasons, but for safety reasons, they might actually be better for you. So you need to be very mindful of that, like very balanced. Look at natural things as elements that can be very useful in moderation and within the right contexts. Don't just go for everything all in one go just because you think, oh, this is natural, nothing can go wrong. A lot of things can go wrong. So
Right.
just be very mindful of that. But also the benefits you get out of it are a lot. So you have to just kind of balance the pros and cons of everything. But as a general rule, essential oils can be safe. Certain ones you just have to be careful with, things that are, I think even sometimes just from smelling them, you can think, oh, this is quite strong. I need to be careful. Like things like cinnamon, you smell it and it's like, whoa, this is really strong. There must be something really kind of, I be careful with that. But yeah, usually if you just look up the safety things with wherever you buy it from, or just send me a message. I'll be happy to kind of like, point you to the right direction or just let you know kind of thing. But, yeah.
I'm glad that you brought that up. I'm just, thinking about, I think it's just partly, well, I'm not sure, but I wonder if it's just partly in terms of how people view our senses. Because
Mhm.
people, when you say, you eat too much of one thing, you can develop a sensitivity. People get that.
Yeah.
Too much vitamin A, your body can have a reaction. People get that. But it's like that with everything.
Mhm.
So, and it doesn't necessarily mean it's bad. It can be very good. Your body actually may need it.
Yeah.
And, when it comes to, vitamins, but anything in excess, I
Yeah.
think people's radar for that is less defined because that's my understanding anyways. I feel like people don't think about their their sense of smell as being as powerfully impacting their health as it actually is.
Yeah.
To what
Yeah.
you were saying, even around COVID, I think people are getting more aware of what you breathe in actually does impact your health.
Mm.
I'm from a very rural area in Canada, so I live now in a metro city, but I mentioned that because I grew up with coniferous trees and literally, moose in my backyard. But part of it that, is that I often find the pollution,
Yeah.
in cities.
Very sensitive to it.
I'm very sensitive to
Yeah.
it. And, some people are like, like what, like,
Yeah.
why do you think this is an issue? And I think it's for that reason. It's
Yeah.
just my system for so long was used to something very different that I can notice it. But
Yeah.
my point of bringing that up is just that it's not to say that you're not safe in a city. But it's just that you are breathing in things. There
Yeah.
are things that are beneficial as well as not beneficial. And to what you said earlier about a balance, you don't need everything to be natural. You
Mm.
don't have to have all your air pristine. It doesn't, all your clothes don't need to be organic. I think that honestly, that's not as feasible for most people, just from a cost standpoint,
No.
amongst other things. But
Yeah.
the point is if you're mindful and you consciously are choosing like where, I'm going to do this natural, I'm going to do that natural, I'm going to do that natural, then you're helping your body not be overloaded.
Mhm.
And so that it can better detoxify and be in a healthier space. You don't have to be perfect with it, I guess is the point.
Yeah.
And if everybody did that, then we'd be in a lot better place.
Definitely.
Just
It's all about support. It's all about,
yeah.
because your body really knows what to do. If your body functions normally, it detoxes everything on its own, it digests everything. The body knows what to do. But
Mhm.
if you support it in a way that just does its own functions, then that's great. Any way you can support, it's what's called in aromatherapy supporting the terrain. So you support the terrain of your body to help it do whatever it needs to do.
Mhm.
Like take the load off, take that kind of, not overload it and overwhelm it with so many different things, which sometimes, especially living in cities, you cannot help but breathe in,
Right.
pollutants it's not possible not to do it. But if then you take the load off when you go home and do things that help it to kind of just function and detox all that stuff naturally,
Mhm.
that's already a step in the right direction. That's already something that's really good. There's been all these studies done specifically on traffic pollution and what oils would work that you diffuse at home that can work in kind of mitigating all the harms that you breathe in all the time. And one of the ones that works really well, apart from comfort trees, of course, is sweet orange. Simple oil, but it's been shown to work really well with that stuff. So again, it's that thing where it doesn't have to be something overly complicated. It doesn't have to be something that's like, oh, I need to find out how to do this. Just get really simple, natural things that are good quality, and it does help. Your body recognizes it. Your body knows what to do with it. Just put it in a space that can help it, and it just does its own thing.
Yes, one of the things that you said that I think speaks to just design in spaces in general is you're saying that you're using scent to facilitate your
Mhm.
body
Exactly.
to detoxify spaces in terms of, like this podcast and just generally in terms of spaces that would enhance or optimize well-being. That's exactly what they're doing in all the senses.
Yeah.
It's facilitating your body to have and experience to
Mhm.
whatever that is, so that was, I love that you brought that up. One other thing just for listeners in terms of scent, I know we're talking about aromatherapy here, but like quick side note, this offsetting of pollution that obviously we inevitably
Yeah.
take in, HEPA filters, considering your HVAC system and windows and ventilation is also a great idea. That's all I needed to say there.
Yeah.
Just wanted to side note,
Out
get
there.
that in for people because a lot of people don't think about it, but
Yeah.
that's a side note. So yeah, so in terms of spaces, I know you mentioned all these different scents to bring in. So and you also mentioned, people can use rosemary on the stove with orange, like, which I love.
Yeah.
That's
It's such a
perfect.
simple thing to do. It smells amazing, right?
Love that. If people were going to bring in essential oils, you had mentioned, you could use Himalayan salts. Are there other tools that you often incorporate when you're, consulting clients in spaces? Is it more like diffusers? Are there some that you tend to lean more towards than others?
I'm a big fan of layering scent. So I'm a big fan of having something that's kind of like a passive diffuser somewhere, something like a reed diffusers. I really like them because you can make the concentration, like, high or low, depending on the space that it's in. And that's kind of just slowly diffusing the scent in the air in a very subtle way. You can add more, you can take out, some of them, so it's something that you can control quite easily. So reed diffusers are something I really like as a passive diffuser. The other thing I actually always ask is, have you got anything natural in your environment that you can add scent to? So I'm one of those people that's constantly picking up like pine cones or driftwood or so. I just really always like these. I always, ever since I was a kid, I would always collect them like a little crow from everywhere. And I would always add little scents to them as, again, like a passive diffuser. So if it's a pine cone, I will add like conifer kind of oils to it. Driftwood, I would add like, some, to me, like driftwood always smells a little bit like rosemary and mint for some reason. It's not really sea smells, but for me, that's what it always kind of evokes to me. So I would always ask the person that I'm doing the consultation with, have you got anything natural? Even some like dried flowers or something like this. So again, it's that thing where you can control how much scent goes into it. And it's that link of visual and sense, like different senses together. So you're looking at something, you're seeing the color of it, you're smelling something that connects to it. All these things kind of add, like, it's just really subtle little things, but they do add to the experience at the end. The other one that's a lot more, it's a lot stronger, is diffusers that are, there are different types. So there's like the ultrasonic ones, the ones that most people will have. It's the one that you add water and then a little bit of the oil, and it's like a constant steam that kind of comes out. That one is really nice if you want to have scent that goes on for the whole day. You just have to be mindful not to put too much oil in there, or else it becomes too much. But actually, that's a nice one. It also humidifies the air a little bit if you're indoors with lots of kind of central heating or air conditioning and stuff like that. So that's a nice one, the ultrasonic ones. The other one is called Ultra Nebulizer. That one is a bit more professional. It used to only be used in professional settings, but they're more available now commercially. And that one doesn't use any water. You use the pure oil in there. You kind of screw in the little bottle in there, and it kind of squeezes the oil and then pushes it out. So you get this like little puff of scent that comes out. And because the molecules of it are tiny, tiny little molecules, they linger in the air a little bit more and then fall down. But the nice thing about them, they've got two reasons why they're good. One is they use a lot less oil. So, sustainability wise, you can use oils that are a bit more precious, a bit more expensive, but they last a lot longer. The second thing is because of their intermittent way of how they get used, how they get kind of puffed out, your body actually recognizes it as more of a therapy because you don't get used to it as much as you do with the ultrasonic ones, the ones that are constantly going. So that thing I was talking about how your brain is constantly assessing safety. So with this one, because it puffs out once, and then I think there are different ones, but usually it's like once every 10 minutes, it will just do a little puff and then kind of die down. you get the benefit every time it goes off. So this one is better if you want the therapeutic benefit of the scent that you're putting in. So if you want it to kind of layer and be get better and better throughout the day, that one is a better one to use. And of course, there's the option of just mixing and matching different things. So you've got your reed diffusers, you've got your ultra nebulizer. That one goes off every 10 minutes. That one is kind of constant and very subtle in the background. Also depends on the space that you've got, and the height of the ceiling makes a big difference too. You don't want things to kind of accumulate so much and kind of rain in on you at the end. You just want it to be nice and subtle. And then apart from like the space ones that you put them in, there are also the personal way of using essential oils. These ones could be different ways. One of my favorite ways is inhalation through like a personal inhaler. So you have these things, little sticks that you basically just kind of pass under your nose and you smell them. And these ones work really well if you want like a hit of almost therapy kind of thing. Like if you're feeling really stressed or something, you just do. Part of why it works is because you end up inhaling, so you end up taking this deep breath in, and just doing breathing exercises on its own without anything else, that can be quite beneficial. But then add the scent element on top of that, and you're getting like a double benefit of everything. You're not only taking a deep breath, you're taking a deep breath of something that's good for you. And it's like, you're not only kind of lowering your stress levels, you're lowering your stress levels, and the essential oils are working, like circulating through your blood, through the lungs, through the blood and everything. So it just, if an all over body experience that you're getting with it. And that's simply through inhaling an essential oil. You don't have the inhaler, that's fine. You can put a drop on like a cotton wool or something, inhale it through that. Again, it doesn't have to be anything that's expensive. The thing that I would always go for is just good quality oils. That's the thing I always emphasize. If the oils are good quality, the way you administer them doesn't have to be expensive. A cotton wool, even a drop on a piece of paper, like a scent strip, even that is good enough. But for a space, you always have to think of layering, layer the scent in a space, and think about how, first of all, what's practical for you. Are you someone who in the morning will put the water in, put the oil, and kind of, the stuff? Or are you one of those people that, just wants one thing, set it up one time, don't touch it for a month? Maybe then the reed diffuser is better for you. So also practicality is very important. How you will use something is down to you at the end of the day. I can give advice on what would work, what wouldn't work, but how is it that you function every day? What's your routine? And how can I fit in with what you're already doing? Not add something on top of it, because it's not really meant to be a burden on you. It's meant to be something you enjoy, something that helps you. So, what is it that you do? How can I adapt what I'm giving you to make it part of your routine, to make it something you enjoy, something you get benefit out of, not something you dread doing? That's the opposite of what I want.
Right. You highlighted a lot of really helpful tips there. I think it's great how you talk about layering, because as soon as you said layering, like again, because, designer, spaces in general are layered. And the biggest thing that comes to my mind is lighting, because lighting
Mm-hmm.
is
Yeah.
it's a very layered experience, which by the
Mm.
way, check out the lighting episode.
Yeah.
If
I
anyone wants
love
to hear,
it.
if anyone wants to hear about the lighting, definitely check out that episode. But the fact that, I'm just, the parallels is the point. We're
Yeah.
talking about the parallels here between how to kind of approach your senses and experiences. And so I think it's very interesting, and I love that you have this layered approach to
Mm-hmm.
scent. And a couple of things that you talked about there. One was around pine cones and kind of having the full experience. And it was reminding me of, things that I've read. And as well, like I had seen this on your website as well, as where you talk about the link between memory and scent, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is important here, because if people are looking to, when they walk through their door at home, if they're looking to feel, like
Yeah.
I feel good, I feel relaxed and happy, there is a huge correlation between scent and memory. So if you are having experiences in your space on a regular basis, or especially like whatever it is, you are going to basically, my understanding from what you're saying is like a body memory
Mm-hmm.
of like, oh, I smelled this. I feel good when I smell this.
Yeah.
You know, it's not to say it's going to disappear all your problems. I'm not,
Yeah.
we're not
I
making
wish.
blanket, we're not making blanket statements here, but the point is it's facilitating, it's helping.
Yeah.
It is a contributing factor to help you feel better, just
Yeah.
like, a bad phone call can
Yeah.
potentially bring you in a different direction. So I just want to make that clear. But the point is that this memory link, can you speak to
Mhm.
that with scent?
Memory is a really, really important thing with scent, or scent is an important thing with memory, I suppose. They're linked together in a way, again, in the brain. And there's been all these studies. I mean, people always know, like, you smell something, immediately you remember something, or it brings you back. And there's the memory linked with scent is always much, much stronger than a memory on its own. And they've done research about this. So if you give somebody a scent of something, they will remember details about an event way more than if you just tell them, can you recall that event, kind of thing. So that goes to show you that there is this link between the two that must be there for a reason. Again, you go back to why we have a sense of smell to begin with, evolutionary wise. Nothing to do with, like, smelling nice and all that kind of stuff. It's safety. It's all about safety at the end of the day. Your body and your brain is always looking for what is the safest place to be, what is the safest thing to do, what is the safest, food to go for, and all that kind of stuff. And the research that they've done, they seem to think that the area of the brain that is linked to how you process a scent, and it's kind of like very, like, in a really simple term, it's almost like a library that you build throughout your whole life. And actually, it starts in the womb. It starts when you're still a fetus in the womb. So you start with whatever your mom started having when you were not even born yet. It's the first sense to develop in you as a human being. So that's why, culturally, you will find that babies will be very accepting of food that their mom had when they were pregnant. So that's why, like, babies in India will have a very different palate than babies born in Canada or in Egypt. It's the mom is the reason why. The mom and what she was smelling and what she was eating is the reason why. And that, again, is a safety thing, so that when you're born, you accept the food that's in your environment, you accept the food that's around you, you know what to go for, what not to go for, and all that. And part of that is knowing where to go for food. And food is linked to scent. So that is why there is that link. They think there's that link in evolution where scent and memory and spatial awareness is all linked together. And that develops into so many things as you grow older. So that develops into why you think of certain smells as good, as bad, like what you were saying with the food poisoning. You now know that certain foods you smell and you will want to avoid them at all
Mhm.
costs, because your body remembers how horrible you felt after having that food. You can get over it, like, you can train yourself to be over it. Like, sometimes, like, they would do things where people who have PTSD, so they have a certain smell, say with a really bad event that happened with a fire or something like this. You smell smoke. Anybody that smells smoke, it's one of those smells that you innately want to run from. You just know it's danger, basically. But say you're a firefighter, you cannot run away. You're running towards smoke. So you almost
Right.
have to get over that fear that you have, that initial kind of reaction you have to something. And yeah, so it's all linked. It's like scent is linked to memory. Memory is linked to, like, the safety. Safety is linked to how you will react to something. So all of these things are linked together. Most of the time, you're not even conscious or aware of that link at all. You're just reacting to things very quickly. You will react before your brain. It's the only sense in the brain that doesn't need to be processed like all the other senses. It's a sense in the area of the brain that's very primitive. It's like, you react before anything else, and then it gets processed. again, it's a safety thing, if you always remember that it all boils down to whether something is safe or not, then everything else makes sense. It makes sense why you will be very attracted to certain smells. You will always remember them. They'll be linked to memories that are very happy. They'll always be brought up again and again. You'll always be attracted to sometimes certain families of scents. So you'll really like floral scents, or you'll really like citrus scents. Whereas some people really like heavier scents like oud and the frankincense. These are the happy scents for them. These are the scents of their childhood, where their safety, their parents' houses, their grandparents' houses. Some people really like spicy scents, like clove, cinnamon, all these kind of things. It just makes a lot more sense. It makes a
Right.
lot more sense why you like certain aromas. I got to stop saying scents. Certain other words have to come to mind. But yeah, basically that's what it is. Like your brain interprets everything and then your body reacts accordingly. And part of that is a big deal to do with memory. You have to always remember things, and you have to remember why something is good or something is bad. And yeah, your body just knows what to do with it.
Yeah, and I mean, what I love about this is because it's really a tool, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're saying, your olfactory system, it brings in information through scent. It's a
Yeah.
tool to bring in information for safety, as you said, is
Mm-hmm.
the kind of the underlying basis of it. But in terms of spaces and emotions, because part of this is like what we've been talking about a little bit more is around, I would say, like more mental, emotional well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Like there are other benefits to aromatherapy, but we're talking about, more of that cognitive, emotional well-being. And that feels like you can use this as a tool to basically have memory and associations
Mm-hmm.
with scent to help you get to a different state. So,
Definitely. Yeah.
yeah. So if you are someone that, has suffers from anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
even, and it's very prevalent, this is a tool. It's not saying it's going to cure your anxiety. let's
Yeah.
just let's
No,
just be clear.
it does become like associated with things, and it can be
Right.
stress, anxiety. It can even be used for things like when you're studying. There's
Mhm.
been studies when if you smell certain scents while you're studying, it actually helps you remember things better. Um, People use it a lot for sleep. Like if you want to go to sleep, there is like rituals that you do, and then a scent that you spray or that you put on, and that almost tells your body, okay, it's time to wind down. It's time to now kind of let go of the day. It's time to go to sleep. So definitely, scent can be used for so many different things. And one of the other things is like more physical things. So people who want to maybe stop smoking or stop craving certain foods, things like that, there's been studies where certain scents can help you with that. So there is that, like apart from just the memory, there's also the physical
Mhm.
manifestation of what that scent does to your body and how it
Mhm.
reacts to it. So it's a
Right.
very, very powerful tool that you can use. Once you understand how it works, it's fascinating. And it's very, very underestimated. I think
Mhm.
it has to do with the idea that you were born with it. Like it started before you're even conscious. Everything else kind of develops as you go along. But the sense of smell is kind of always there until it's not, like in COVID, or if something happens and you lose your sense of smell. And that's why a lot of people, when they lost their sense of smell during COVID, they were distraught. Like it's not normal not to have that connection with the outside world, because that's what it is. The sense of smell is you connected to everything else around you unconsciously. Once you lose that connection, suddenly you feel lost, like you feel like something's wrong but you don't know what it is. That's
Mhm.
apart from you not being able to taste anything, which is of course makes everything even worse, because 80% of the sense of taste is actually smell. So the minute you lose your sense of smell, you just lose the taste of life almost. So it's a very, very underestimated sense that you only really appreciate if you suddenly lose it, or if you start learning about it. Then you're fascinated. Like I'm fascinated by I'm fascinated by the different aspects and the different ways you can use it, and the different areas it can be incorporated in.
Yeah, as you were speaking about that, just for kind of effect for, the listeners, listeners that are learning more about, their scent of, that are really kind of learning here in terms of the capabilities of their olfactory system. I remember, I'll link this study in the interview, but I remember reading about how, you hear people say you can smell fear. And I
Mhm.
remember reading a study of how, like, to what you're saying, subconsciously,
Yeah.
your olfactory system actually picks up fear in sweat.
Yeah, it
Like,
does.
you literally can smell fear. If
Yeah.
there's like, scientifically,
Yeah.
we smell it, and that impacts our interactions, our
Yeah.
behaviors. It's like such a subtle thing, and people may not even know why.
See, that's
But
a really interesting one to go back to, that whole tradition versus science. When people say you go into a place and the energy is really bad,
Mhm.
because someone in there is very agitated, and they say, oh, the energy is really bad in here. I need to like cleanse the energy. And it sounds very woo woo, and it sounds like this person is nuts. But actually, that's what they're picking up on. They're picking up on
Definitely.
that anxiety that someone has, and that person is basically projecting it everywhere. So it
Which
makes
is
you feel
fear.
that, yeah.
Mhm.
And it's down to safety. So your body's telling you, this area that
Mhm.
you're in right now, something is going to
Exactly.
happen. I need to run away. So you need to be on high alert. So straight away you
Right.
start tensing up. All of this is happening without you consciously kind of, narrating all of that in your brain. It's just a reaction that you're getting. And it's all to do with
Right.
survival at the end.
Right. No, I love that. So this is all in, this is more of a fun one, but like, if you were stranded on a desert island and you were only allowed to bring one aromatherapy tool, whether that's an essential oil or what have you, what would your one item be?
Yeah, that's a difficult one, because like as an aromatherapist, I have like a whole list of them. But I did like, if I think of one oil that I can think of that will be useful in so many different situations that I actually like also, it would be lavender. That's the one that I would take with me every. That's the one I travel with everywhere, because
Mm,
it's kind of like, it's called the Swiss Army knife of essential oils. It's one that can be used for bug bites. It can be used for any inflammation, can be used for relaxing. Actually, very few people know this, but if you use too much of the lavender, it then becomes a stimulant. So it makes you more alert, kind of thing. So that's another thing. Sometimes people who don't know much about aromatherapy, they'll like, put half a bottle of lavender thinking it will help them sleep and just stay wired for the whole night. That's because you use too much of it.
okay.
So I find like lavender is a really good oil that's like all rounder, and I like the smell of it. Like the other oil would have been tea tree oil, but I can't really think of tea tree oil as one that I would use too much of.
Okay. I mean, lavender, I feel like that is definitely one a lot of people kind of gravitate towards too. I didn't know all of those benefits from it though, so that's really, really helpful to know.
Yeah. And
Um,
there's also different types of lavender too, which is another thing most people don't know. So that's another thing with plants, that you learn about when you're doing aromatherapy, is that just because a plant is by its common name, like say rosemary or lavender or thyme, that doesn't mean that all of them are exactly the same, because there's something called a chemotype of a plant, and that has to do with where the plant is grown. Sometimes it's the same country, the same hill, but one is on the sunny side, one is on the dark side. The plant will adapt to what it needs to survive. So the chemicals that it would produce would be slightly different, which means that the benefits of the oil that it produces are slightly different. So things like lavender, there's like, on top of my head, there's something like four different types of lavender. Some of them are like, what you wouldn't use as like a relaxing one and stuff like that. But there's another type of lavender called spike lavender, and that one is actually quite cancerous. So it's very good for things like pain, but it's not good for things like relaxation and sleep. So that's another thing people could also be aware or unaware of, is that the common name of a plant is not enough for you to identify an essential oil. You always need to look at the Latin name, and the Latin name will then tell you what that plant is specifically. just to make sure that you're using the right oil for the right purpose at the end.
Right. I mean, it's there's a lot of information. It's a lot of, it feels like dense and, information to weed through. I'm wondering, in terms of shopping for an essential oil, I know we talked about this a little bit earlier. But what would be, if you were giving someone kind of a beginner advice in terms of what do you look for to make sure something's a good quality essential oil? Like, I know that, you said price, like too low
Yeah.
is an indicator. And I feel like that, encompasses a lot of areas of life where you're like,
Mm.
there's something off about
Yeah.
that. I'm not sure, that looks a little too good to be
Yeah.
true. It's too good to be true. So yeah, what would be your advice in terms of what to look for to make sure you're buying a high quality essential oil?
So my advice would be, and that would apply to any company anywhere in the world. So it's not specific to something. So that can apply to anyone listening, basically. Look at the bottle and look at the label. And the label, if it's a good quality oil and a good company that's producing it, they will usually have certain things that are on the label. One of them is obviously the common name, because that's the one that most people will go for. And then it has to have the Latin name under it. The Latin name makes a big difference, like I explained, of what it is that's inside that oil and whether it's something, this is what you want or this is not what you want. Some of them can be skin safe, some of them cannot be skin safe. So, like certain things. So, the Latin name is very important. And then the other thing would be the country of origin, because the country of origin can also change the chemistry of the oil. At the top of my head, like rose coming from Bulgaria is slightly different than the rose that comes from France. Not that it's better or worse, it's just slightly different. It's a different type of oil. So if you're going for a specific thing for a specific reason, you just need to know what it is that you get. Again, it's that thing of knowledge. Just be knowledgeable about what it is that you're getting and then decide whether that's what you need or not. The other thing would be size of the thing. It has to tell you like the size, but that's kind of normal, say that. And allergens. It would state what allergens are in the oil. This is a little bit more difficult because I think different countries have different ways and different laws of what need to be put on the label. I would usually go with the ones that are the EU laws because they're usually the safest one. Sometimes people say they're a bit too strict, but actually, if you are allergic to something, strict is not bad. You usually put the laws, for the weakest, not the strongest. So you want to be able to know what's in there and what's not. So the allergens are important to know. Most essential oils will have like two or three different components in there that will be stated. And just because they're stated doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It's just mainly for people, the small percentage of people who are allergic to certain things. They need to know what's in the bottle. You need as much information as possible in there. And then the other thing would be to know the type of extract, like how was it extracted from the plant? Because there's different ways of distilling an oil. The most common one is steam distillation, which is, the one with the still, the one that looks really pretty, all that kind of stuff. And the other one would be cold pressing. So that would be things for like citrus oils and things like that. That's usually cold pressed. But then there are other ways of doing it. So there is a way called absolute. If you do an absolute extraction, that there is usually a trace amount of chemical in there because of the way it's extracted. This is usually for a plant material that cannot be steam distilled for different reasons. Either they're too sensitive, so they kind of disintegrate if you do that way. So again, some people could be slightly allergic to something, so they need to know how it was actually extracted. So these would be the things that I would look for, regardless of what company you're looking at. These are the things to kind of look at in a label. If something is not right or something is missing, I would just like avoid it and look for somewhere else because these are like basic things. Any good company, any good aromatherapist, these are the things they would look for in any oil. If you want to go really further into it, you can then look to see if on the website they've got any analysis of the oil sometimes. But really, unless you know what you're looking for, the analysis papers don't make much sense to you. Like, like that is not something that a normal kind of person would look at an analysis paper and kind of realize what it is. It's very expensive to get them done, so smaller companies don't get them, kind of thing. So that's kind of a bit extra kind of one. But yeah, these would be the things that I would look for when looking at an oil. And then the price is a good indicator. Certain oils are not that expensive. You can find them quite reasonable. Certain oils will always be expensive, regardless of where they are in the world. Things like, because of the way, the amount of material needed to produce an oil. So a really good example of that is rose. You need thousands of pounds of rose itself to produce a tiny amount of oil. So I don't care what company does it. There is no way that rose is going to be cheap. If you find cheap rose, more than likely what they've done is two things. Either they've diluted it into another oil. So they've put it into like a jojoba oil or grapeseed oil or something like this, which is fine as long as it just says it on the label. You're not getting pure oil, you're getting a diluted oil. Usually you can tell by the texture. If you put it on your finger on a piece of paper, it will kind of spread like an oil stain. If it's a pure oil, it dries out and disappears after a while. So this is like a really quick kind of test to know. The other thing would be they would adulterate it. So they will add a cheaper oil on top of it that smells similar to it. So you think you're getting the pure one, but actually you're getting an adulterated one. With rose, it's usually geranium. That's the one that's closest to it. So they will add like geranium and rose. Smells close enough to rose. People who don't know will probably think, and then they sell it really cheap, and people think they're getting this bargain. Actually, you're not getting the proper rose kind of thing. So yeah, so that these are the guidelines I would think would apply to any company, any kind of country. This would probably be what you should look out for.
That's great. I mean, I'm thinking, and as you said earlier, most people you can reach out to them when if they
Mm,
sell essential oils, like you have Yatlina, which
yeah,
I'll link here in the episode, of course. But for that too, if you have extra questions, most people that I would think that are
yeah,
dedicated to selling high quality products will have a customer service that can help guide you because
yeah.
of
Because you're usually very proud of your sourcing too. So I'm always very happy to answer any questions because I spend a lot of time getting the good stuff. So if somebody asks me, I'm happy to answer the question. And I'm sure it's the same with other companies too.
definitely. I would think exactly. And like a fact page, and
Mm,
somewhere that you could go, just even to what you said in terms of safety, that I
mm,
think that, having that information on their site and or a way for you to be able to ask a question or two is
yeah,
important. Or um,
definitely. Yeah.
so if you could snap your fingers and change one thing about how people use or understand aromatherapy globally, what would you change?
Ooh, that's a big question. I think it would have to be with the safety, that just because it's natural does not mean it's safe. That you have to be very mindful how you use it, not just for um, like everyday kind of thing, but also where it's sourced from. So you need to also be aware that certain oils are coming from endangered plants and vulnerable areas. So just because you hear that an oil is really good, you find it on some site somewhere, doesn't mean you should automatically go for it. Do you really need it or not? Do you know what you're going to be using it for? It's not like a collection thing that you just hoard lots of oils and then kind of not know what to do with it. So I would say sourcing and safety are two things that, if more people are aware of it, I think the use of essential oils will be a lot more mindful. And it will be a lot more beneficial because people will know what they're using it for. They'll know the alternatives. They'll know when to use it, when not to use it. So I think these would probably be, that's two things, isn't it? Yeah. Safety
No,
and sustainability.
no, that's great. How do you incorporate scent into your own personal space?
Oh, everywhere. I love anything scented. I love scented stuff. So I would use it. I have diffusers. I have reed diffusers. I also have my facial oil that's got a little bit of essential oils in it, for a reason, not just for scent. Like things that do well for your skin. I have body oils, but I do have to say one thing. I don't use everything all in one go. And there are days when I don't want any scent at all. Like sometimes if I'm blending for a project or blending for a client, I will not want any other scent around me. I wouldn't even be chewing gum. Like I don't want any kind of any interference because I want to concentrate on that thing. It then becomes too much. But other days I'll be like, you know what? I really want like an inhaler going. I really want like a diffuser going. The more I'm using essential oils and the more I'm more aware of them, the less I'm using them. I've got lots of different things that I can use, but I don't use them as much as I used to before. Before, I used to have a diffuser going 24 hours a day in like constantly kind of thing. Now I know that that is not the way to do it. That was not the right way of using anything or getting any benefit out of it. So I'm a lot more mindful of how I use things, and I think I get a lot more benefit out of it too. So inhalers are a big thing that I use quite often because they're easy and I can change the scent in them. It's not constantly on. I only use them when I need them. But yeah, that's I think that's how I use scent. I use it in different ways depending on what it is I need it for, but not constantly, not the way I used to before.
Well, thank you for today. I feel like we covered a lot of stuff, and I'm sure I'm probably going to have more questions after this and I re-listen. So I may be reaching out to you again in the future for another interview. I think that we covered a lot of things here that a lot of people will be able to really gain some information around how they can use scent to optimize and facilitate better health and well-being through spaces. So thank you for that. And I want to bring attention to your website again, Yatlina. You sell a range of products. So you sell essential oils. I don't know if you want to speak to that for a second of what your offerings are for people who may be interested to reach out directly.
Yeah, my website, I had this idea of I wanted to only sell things that I would buy myself. I would never sell something that just because, it's out there and it's aromatherapy. So I tried to collect the things that I would be happy to use myself. So things that inhalation of essential oils, and I've got personal inhalers, one of my favorites. I've also got aroma patches, which are a kind of a different way of kind of surrounding yourself with a bubble of your own little diffuser as you walk around. It's a really beautiful way of doing it. Got the blends that you can use for different things, and I've made the blends that appeal to most amount of people for the different things that I'm always being asked for. So things like stress, anxiety, just relaxation, meditation, all those kind of things. And then I've got a few different products and essential oils. Not a lot. I always get small batch things, mainly from either directly from the growers and the producers and distillers themselves if I can, if not through intermediary people that I trust have good relationships with the growers. Because a lot of the big companies, unfortunately, will just go in for bulk buying and kind of try to undercut the farmers and the distillers. And I find that a little bit, I just don't like that way of doing things. So I take a really long time to make sure that I get the sources from people that I trust and I like the way they do business. So that's why I don't have a huge range of things, but the ones I do have are the oils I really love. So I put them on there. I have some diffusers like the ones I've been talking about also, so that you know how to use the different oils. And then I have my other passion. One of the things I'm very passionate about is Egyptian blue lotus, which is one of those oils that's not very common, not very well known. It's got all this big mythology and, all these stories behind it. And me being Egyptian, I was always very drawn to it. So I've researched it a lot more. I've spent a lot of time trying to find people who grow it properly and distill it properly. Took me about 3 years, but I found a good source at the end. So that's one of the other things. And what else have I got in there? Oh, the last thing I got recently is herbs that are grown directly from the growers in Egypt. They grow organic herbal plants there. So I've got some stuff from there, like chamomile and lemongrass and hibiscus and things like that. I think they're also really nice. Some slow diffused oils that you can use for different things. So yeah, like a small collection of products, but I'm all very, very passionate about each one of them. It takes me a very long time to get everything properly done. Because again, I always think, would I buy this product if I see it somewhere or not? And if it's not one I would buy, I don't put it on the website.
I love that. I mean, you emanate integrity and passion, and I think that that is definitely someone that I will be buying from. You also offer consultation services for scent for spaces. So if you
Mm-hmm.
want something bespoke and personalized, whether that's for, your home or an office, commercial environment. So I'll highlight that. And do you ship international?
I do. I ship everywhere in the world, basically, that the Royal Mail in London ships to.
Great. So there's that. I'm definitely going to be checking out the lotus. I've already been like eyeing that on your
Yeah.
website because I'm very into tradition as well, and
Yeah.
I'm all about that. So I'm sure I'll be emailing you about that later with a
Yeah.
couple of questions.
Happy to help you choose whatever you want.
Thank you. Well, thank you for today, and this is fabulous, and you're fabulous, and I love this. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed this. Thank you.
That's it for this episode. Please remember before you go to subscribe below. You can also check us out on Instagram at bestkind.design or our website at bestkind.design. Best Kind Design's interior services are also available for hire. So if you have a residential, commercial, or a hospitality project, we'd love to hear from you. You can reach us at info@bestkind.design. Until next time, be well.